The asphalt burned under the tires of that red machine. Hangin cut through the city, but the roar of the engine was drowned out by his phone ringing. He pulled it out, impatient. On the other end, a female voice dropped a bomb. She was pregnant with his child. Hangin almost breathed fire. "You've got to be kidding me. I've got better things to do," he shouted, thinking it was just another cheap scam aimed at a working man. Furious, he brushed off the absurdity and focused on what mattered, the deliveries. He didn't waste time. Eyes locked on the horizon, brow furrowed, blood in his eyes. He sped up like he was running from hell, weaving through heavy traffic. For a delivery guy, every second is a battle, and he refused to lose. He flew straight to the office. Inside, 4 guys were chatting about some Miss Sue, saying the woman was tough to deal with. Hangin rolled in hard, screeching the tires, blasting his headlight in everyone's face just to make his presence known. The guys were blinded by the glare, but he didn't care. As the gossip kept flowing, Wang Han pulled out a cigarette and stared down the fat guy in the group. "What the hell are you mumbling about?" he snapped. That's when the fat guy spilled it. The girl came from a powerful family, and her fate was already sealed. She was set to marry the city's rich heir. Our hero couldn't care less until he saw the photo. The fat guy swore she was a goddess and that the rich heir was trash, a real scumbag. Hangin froze when he saw the image. That face wasn't unfamiliar. He grabbed the phone from the fat guy's hand to check every detail. The shock hit hard. It was the same woman he had run into at that hotel. It clicked. That call wasn't a joke. It was the raw, cruel truth. A month earlier, Nanan returned to the scene of that night, feeling the world spin. Her stomach churned, and her head felt like it was about to explode. She thought it was just a hangover from the drink Shi Nuo had served her, but it was much worse. The drink had been spiked. She dragged herself along the walls, fighting to stay conscious, until she found room 899. The door was ajar. In her condition, she didn't suspect a thing, thinking someone had just been careless. She had no idea the room already had an occupant. Inside, the man drowned his sorrow straight from the bottle. He was at rock bottom after being told he'd have to go back to life as a delivery guy. Wang Han froze when he saw a stranger collapse onto his bed. Completely out of it, Nanan barely managed to ask who he was and beg for help before everything went dark. The hero's face burned instantly. He froze, looking away as his heart raced. The stranger was too beautiful to be real. She clutched his shirt, begging for help, and Hangin just stood there, unable to figure out what was going on with her. For a moment, he thought he was stuck in some crazy dream. Back in the present, the fat guy at the office snapped him out of it, asking why he'd hung up the phone. Hangin stared at the photo, connecting the dots, while the fat guy cracked up, thinking he was making another tall tale. The fat guy kept going. "What, now you're gonna say you're the rich girl's boyfriend?" Another coworker jumped in, mocking him, saying Hangin only talked nonsense and that his last lie was being an international arms dealer. He didn't flinch. He just lit his cigarette, blew out the smoke, and dropped the truth. "You don't get it. I'm working undercover." The guys burst out laughing, climbing onto their bikes. "Even a parrot can talk," they shouted, joking that he must own the world. But the laughter died in their throats when a red sports car screeched to a stop right in front of them. Everyone's jaws dropped. Seeing a machine like that there was a miracle. The door lifted, and out stepped a woman's foot in killer high heels. It was her, the same redhead he'd crossed paths with at that hotel a month earlier. Nanan, the powerful heiress, stepped out and brought traffic to a halt. The delivery guys couldn't close their mouths, drooling over her beauty and grinning like idiots. The impact was total. The fat guy was the first to connect the dots. "It's the girl from the photo," he stammered. No one understood a thing. What did a goddess from the elite want in a place like that? Nanan ignored the crowd and went straight to Hangin, who was there stretching like nothing was happening. "Why the hell don't you answer the damn phone?" she snapped. His coworkers almost had a heart attack. Hangin calmly took the cigarette from his mouth. "What calls? What's going on?" he asked. That's when Nanan dropped it in front of everyone. She was pregnant, and the child was his. The silence was deafening. The delivery guys stood in shock, realizing that this time their coworker wasn't lying. Hangin rubbed his forehead, trying to process it, then looked her straight in the eyes and asked the final question. "Are you absolutely sure this child is mine?" Determined to end all doubt, Nanan locked eyes with him and gave an ultimatum. "We're going to the hospital right now." She ordered him into the car. The fat guy, seeing his friend frozen like a statue, started pushing him, yelling for him to move and not miss that chance. Hangen realized there was no way out. "Fine, I'll go, but cover for me with the boss," he asked his coworkers. He dropped into the passenger seat of that machine, and the redhead floored it, cutting through the streets toward the medical center. On the way, the silence was tense. Scratching the back of his neck, he asked again, "But it's really mine?" Nainan shot back instantly. "Why would I lie about something like that?" With a serious look, he laid it out. If the child was his, he wouldn't run. He would take responsibility for the child and for her too. Nainan glanced away from traffic for a second, her face heating up. She let out an ironic smile. "And you're gonna support us with what you make delivering food?" Hangen didn't back down. "My money's clean, and I'm not ashamed of my job. I can handle it and support my family without any drama," he shot back. She tried to argue about the weight of her family name, but he cut her off with a yawn. "Status is just a detail, pure nonsense," he said. That was the trigger. Seething with anger, she slammed on the brakes without warning. Without a seatbelt, Hangen was thrown forward and smashed his forehead into the windshield. "Have you lost your mind? Did you do that on purpose?" he yelled, rubbing the bump on his head. But the car was already at the hospital entrance. "We're here. Get out," she ordered, furious. Outside the vehicle, Nangan leaned there, staring into nothing, lost in her own ghosts. She warned him not to talk about responsibility so lightly. Her family would crush him if they found out the truth. The hero snapped. Thumping his chest, he swore he wasn't joking and that if his blood was involved, he'd give everything for them. Nangan felt the weight of his words and, without saying anything else, headed into the hospital, signaling for him not to lag behind. In the hallway, she made one last request before they entered the room. Hangen was left waiting in the corridor, watching doctors and patients pass by until the ground dropped out from under him. The girl was walking straight toward the operating room. Panic hit. He couldn't believe she was really going through with it. Nangan stopped at the door and looked back. With sadness heavy in her eyes, she said, "It's now." Hangen's blood boiled. He instantly understood what was about to happen and didn't hesitate. He rushed over and grabbed her by the shoulder. "Didn't you hear a word I said?" he roared, furious. Nangan fired back bitterly, saying he lived in another world if he thought he could support a family. But he didn't retreat. "I already told you money isn't the problem." In the middle of the argument, a nurse appeared at the door, saying the table was ready. "I'm going," Nangan said coldly. Hangen still gripped her shoulder, pleading with his eyes for her to stop this madness, but the redhead walked in without looking back, leaving the child's father standing there alone. It felt like a punch to the gut. No words in the world seemed able to change her mind. Inside, the atmosphere was cold. Nangan lay on the gurney, staring at the ceiling, while the surgeon pulled on gloves and asked if he could begin. Outwardly, she said yes, but inside, her heart was in pieces, screaming with doubt. The doctors tried to calm her, promising it would be quick, but her conscience spoke louder. At the last second, she froze everything. She asked the doctors to stop and stepped aside. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Hangen slumped on a bench, bitter, thinking fate had played him for a fool. Suddenly, the door opened. Nangan walked out unharmed, wearing the same clothes as before. Hangen nearly fell off the bench. "Already?" he asked, unable to understand how the surgery could have been so fast. He hurried after her, desperate to know what had happened inside. Exhausted, she asked for just one thing. "Get me out of here and take me home. Can you drive?" A grin spread across the hero's face. He slipped an arm around her shoulders, protective, and said, "With pleasure. Leave it to me." He took the wheel gladly. If he could fly a plane, that car was a toy. The red sports car hugged the road toward her family's mansion. As they passed the second block of the district, Hangan's phone buzzed. One of his contacts was warning him about a major auction happening that day. The old man wanted him there in person, especially with Lin King-jun in the area. As the news of the auction dropped, Nanon drifted off in the passenger seat. They stopped in front of mansion number 19 and Hangan nudged her. "Wake up, we're here." Even awake, her face was still weighed down by melancholy. She got out of the car and said flatly, "Get out of here before someone from my family sees you." But Hangan noticed she was swaying with weakness and insisted on walking her to the door. Nanon tried to brush him off, telling him not to get involved, but fate moved faster. She stumbled hard and cried out as she lost her footing. Hangan lunged and caught her mid-air. "You're way too clumsy, girl," he exclaimed. Offended, the redhead didn't let it slide and dug her nails into his arm, pinching him hard enough to make him yell. He twisted in pain, but didn't let go.
To avoid another fall, he scooped her up without asking and carried her inside. Despite complaining about her attitude, he carried her carefully and set her down on the couch. He knelt right there to tend to her swollen ankle. Nanan told him to get lost, but he ordered, "Stay still and don't move." As he wrapped her ankle, the piece shattered. Nanan's mother and her best friend, Hyman, appeared in the living room like ghosts. The woman stared at the scene, demanding to know what kind of mess this was. Hangan explained about the ankle accident, and Nanan, without blinking, dropped the bomb. "Mom, this is my boyfriend. He came to take care of me." Shock rippled through the room. Hangan almost fell over after being promoted to boyfriend out of nowhere. Nanan's mother exploded. "You're calling this delivery guy your boyfriend?" Hyman, boiling with anger, pointed at the hero, yelling to know who that ragged guy was. Nanan froze, unable to give details, leaving the air thick with tension as she tried to decide what to say next. Nanan tried to ease the tension, saying it was all just a joke and that the guy was only helping because of her fall. Her mother, Zhao Haimin, lectured her, saying she couldn't be careless, especially with her marriage to the kin heir just around the corner. Hangan couldn't swallow the venom. He stood up to the woman, outraged by her contempt for his work. "What's wrong with being a delivery guy?" he fired back. The snobbish woman nearly foamed at the mouth, snapping that someone at his level shouldn't even dare to dream so high.
The young man's blood boiled. He locked eyes with her, his gaze sharp, and demanded that she repeat the insult. Sensing trouble, Nanan stepped in, thanked him for the help, and asked him to leave. Hangan snorted in disgust, shoved his hands into his pockets, and turned his back on those arrogant people. As he stormed out under the hateful glare of Nanan's best friend, her mother ordered the floor disinfected where the stinky delivery guy had walked. In the bedroom, the blonde pinned Nanan against the wall, demanding to know what she had with that man. Nanan tried to dodge the question, but her friends saw through it immediately. "It's written all over your face. Something's wrong." With no way out, the redhead placed the hand on her belly and dropped the bomb. She was pregnant. The blonde nearly fell over. "With a delivery guy? Have you lost your mind?" she screamed, asking how she planned to hide that from the Kin family. Nanan stood firm and said she was keeping the child. She explained that the guy had already promised to take responsibility, but her friend kept yelling that a Sioux heiress had nothing to do with a nobody like him. Meanwhile, Hangan was already far from the mansion. On the street, he grumbled about how impossible it was to find a taxi in a rich neighborhood like that. But his luck turned fast. A luxurious black car screeched to a stop in front of him, and the mysterious driver signaled to him. The shock was instant when he saw who was in the passenger seat. He couldn't believe his eyes. An elderly man in a suit, posture flawless, stepped out, greeted him politely, and introduced himself as the spokesperson for a powerful group called Linking. The protagonist stayed silent, sizing him up from head to toe, realizing immediately that the old man already knew exactly who he was. After a respectful bow, the veteran spoke plainly. He was there to escort him to the grand auction. The young man scratched his head, recalling that this invitation had already been mentioned. When he said he needed a shower and decent clothes, the man assured him everything would be taken care of. Soon, the hero settled into the luxury of a dark limousine, heading off to get ready for the event. The auction venue was overflowing, tables packed with powerful figures from all over. As soon as he stepped inside, Wang Han felt suffocated by the crowd. In the middle of it all, his eyes met those of the blonde he had seen at Nan's house. The shock was mutual. She walked straight up to him, asking what a delivery guy like him was doing in a place like that. He tried to explain himself, but she didn't even let him finish. Pointing a finger at him, she labeled him on the spot, saying he had to be there doing some side job as a waiter or something. Wang Han tried to deny it, but she was faster. Lin Sufu dug her fingers into the sleeve of his expensive jacket and violently dragged him into a secluded corner. The atmosphere turned heavy. She leaned in close and dropped the bomb. Nan was like a sister to her, and if he didn't man up and take responsibility for that child, things would get ugly. The hero froze, completely shocked, because he was sure that issue had already been settled. Consumed by rage, the blonde lunged at him, grabbing his collar and screaming that her friend had backed out of going through with the plan. That's when it hit Wang Han. The surgery at the hospital never happened. She had decided to carry the pregnancy to term. As a final blow, the furious Lin Sufu hurled one last threat and drove the heel of her shoe into his leg. He howled in pain, clutching his knee, as the announcer's voice echoed through the hall, declaring that the bidding was about to begin. Heart racing and mind in chaos, Wang Han could only think about getting out of there to find Nan and put an end to this mess once and for all. A shy figure wearing glasses suddenly appeared to greet him. She introduced herself as Liu Ye, the assistant assigned by management to accompany him on this mission. He barely paid attention, only saying that the game was starting and it was time to take their seats. As soon as they sat down, the tension thickened. 3 imposing figures entered, stealing the breath of everyone in the room. One of them, with a disgusting smile as he stroked his mustache, made it clear that the new district project already had an owner, and that owner was the Qin family. The young clan leader, overflowing with arrogance, made it plain: either they respected Qin territory or they would pay a very high price. Curious, Wang Han asked who the arrogant man was. The assistant, speaking quietly, explained that they were the city's elite. The move was dirty. The Sin family planned to snatch the project just to save the Su family, solving their problems through this alliance. At that moment, the hero remembered his conversation with the fat guy at work. He was staring at the relatives of the man who planned to take Nan to the altar. The auctioneer broke the silence by announcing lot 052, the crown jewel everyone wanted. Without hesitation, the Qin heir raised his paddle with an absurd bid, $5 billion. The hall fell silent. Who would dare challenge an empire like that? That's when the protagonist, ice cold, raised his own paddle and doubled it to $6 billion. Shock rippled through the room. People started whispering, thinking the guy was basically committing suicide by challenging the powerful like that. They shouted that he was reckless, that the Sin family would wipe him out for interfering in something that was already a done deal.
Across the room, the Qin fatso nearly had a stroke. He punched his own leg, foaming with rage, and screamed, demanding to know who the hell this audacious bastard was who dared to pick a fight. Unfazed, Han shot back, "This is an auction. Whoever has more firepower wins." The rich brat, completely unhinged, asked if he hadn't heard that the project already belonged to his family. With one hand in his pocket, dripping disdain, the hero replied, "And what does that have to do with me?" The crowd lost it. No one could understand where that kind of audacity came from. Eyes bloodshot and veins bulging, Qin Lei raised his paddle again, yelling that he would cover any bid. The bidding turned into a battlefield. The price was already pushing 700 million, but Wang Han didn't retreat an inch. He raised his paddle and slammed down 800 million on the spot. The fat man snapped. He jumped to his feet, stormed over, and shouted for everyone to hear that in this city, the Qin family's word was the only law. Completely out of control, the man lunged forward and grabbed the young man by the neck, snarling that no one stole what belonged to them. Wang Han didn't even blink, answering only with a look of pure contempt. Bloodshot with fury, the aggressor screamed that the bid was now 900 million and dared him to continue if he had the guts. The response? Laughter right in his face. Flashing a cynical grin, Han dropped the bomb. $1 billion. That was the breaking point for Qin Lei. He clenched his fists, swearing the kid would be dog food before the day was over. He didn't even get time to breathe. The counterattack came like lightning. A brutal punch exploded into the fat man's face, sending him flying back like a rag doll. As the Qin heir writhed on the floor, his bulky bodyguards rushed in to retaliate. Wang Han gave them no chance. He grabbed the first chair he saw and hurled it with savage force, knocking out the first guard instantly. The second froze in terror, but it was useless. A precise kick straight to the face took him down before he could even blink. Qin Lei, hands pressed to his bloody face, could barely believe the humiliation. "You dared to touch me?" he screamed. The hero looked down at him coldly and confirmed, "I didn't just hit you. I'm not done yet." With a powerful kick, he sent one of the guards' bodies crashing into their boss, crushing the fat man under the weight of his own henchmen.
With chaos fully unleashed, the protagonist turned to the audience and calmly asked if anyone else wanted to beat the bid. The host, drenched in sweat and shaking with fear, stammered that the land was his. Without wasting time, Han ordered his assistant to handle the paperwork and the billion-dollar transfer. He had other things to deal with. Elsewhere, Lin Sufu confronted her grandfather, demanding answers. She couldn't understand why she had been dragged to an auction they had already lost. The old man, shrouded in mystery, simply told her to keep quiet and wait for a special guest. The blonde went on alert, trying to guess who this figure was that left even her grandfather so cautious. Behind the scenes, the news spread fast. The powerful Qin family had been defeated by a complete unknown.
Curiosity aided her as she scrolled through her phone, desperate to know who the madman was who dared challenge the powerful. The grandfather, with an enigmatic look, said the buyer was exactly the person they were waiting for. She scoffed, assuming he must be an insufferable, arrogant jerk, and said she was going to call her best friend to share the news. Walking down the corridor, Lin Sufu's thoughts raced. She believed the Sin family would now be forced to cooperate no matter what, and she needed to warn Nan immediately. Distracted, she didn't notice Wang Han coming from the opposite direction, and the collision was unavoidable. She slammed her head into his chest. Furious, she immediately started yelling, calling the delivery guy blind and showing her disgust openly. Wang Han, who was just as fed up with seeing her face, kept walking without giving her the time of day. As soon as he was rid of her, he called Nan to say he had something crucial to tell her. When he entered the office, the hero was received with full honors. The old man jumped up from the couch, beaming at the sight of the young master. Wang Han confirmed the land was his and asked who that rude blonde was earlier. The veteran smiled knowingly and explained she was his unmarried granddaughter who happened to admire him greatly. Wang Han shifted the focus and asked about Nan. The grandfather said she was the jewel of the Su family, raised under strict control and heavy discipline. With a mischievous smile, Wang Han asked about her romantic history. The grandfather assured him that despite being stubborn and difficult, she had never let anyone get close. She had never even had a boyfriend. The news hit the hero like music to his ears. At that moment, his phone buzzed. It was Nan. When he answered, she went straight to the point. She needed to see him now. He agreed immediately, and as he was leaving, the old man tried to mention that he and his granddaughter had studied together in London, but the young man was already gone. They met on a park bench, under the shadow of towering buildings. Nan sat there, eyes lost on the blue lake, carrying a sadness that spilled over. The atmosphere was heavy until Wang Han arrived, this time on his faithful red motorcycle. He approached quietly and in a protective gesture, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Without beating around the bush, he assured her she didn't need to panic about the baby. He promised he would marry her right then and there and that neither of them would ever lack anything. She looked at him, torn between hope and doubt, and asked if he really had the means to support that kind of life. Gazing up at the vast sky, the protagonist prepared to give his final answer. She grew suspicious immediately. To her, he had no idea what kind of fortune that accessory represented. When she held the watch out in front of him, Wang Han didn't just recognize the luxury model, he calmly stated its exact value, $352,000. His knowledge completely threw her off balance. Nan, stunned, asked how many lifetimes he would have to grind as a delivery driver to pay for a luxury like that. His answer was dry and straight to the point. He guaranteed that she and the baby would never struggle, so the price wasn't her concern. The mood shifted when the redhead's phone rang loudly. It was her mother, hysterical, ordering her to rush home because that Chin guy was already there to settle the wedding details. With no way out, she asked him for a ride.
He agreed immediately, full of energy. He walked over to his red motorcycle, slapped the seat, and told her to hop on. No fuss. She climbed on behind him, and he took off, tearing through the asphalt. Along the way, the wind messed up her hair, and feeling a strange sense of peace beside him, she relaxed and rested her face against his back, enjoying the moment as they crossed the city. Their destination was the Su residence. When they arrived, the hero refused to leave her alone and insisted on going inside to escort the mother of his child. As soon as they stepped in, the redhead announced she had company. The reception was pure chaos. Her mother exploded in screams, demanding answers for her disappearance, while the rich suitor had been left waiting. Nan tried to stay calm, saying she had just gone out to clear her head. Sitting on the sofa with a cynical smile was the Chin family heir, ready to lock in the engagement. He was a complete jerk when he greeted her. Nan didn't swallow it and laid it out plainly. The wedding should be canceled since the business between the families was still unresolved. The sleazy guy shot back that they would marry first, and only then would he decide whether she deserved the money. Her mother, desperate for cash, tried to intervene, reminding everyone that he had promised $1 billion to save them. Nan stood her ground. In the middle of everyone's shock, she firmly grabbed Wang Han's hand and dropped the bomb. There would be no wedding because she was already carrying the child of the man standing beside her. The silence in the room was jaw-dropping. The news hit like a grenade. Her mother, out of her mind, tried to drill it into her head that the guy was nothing but a delivery driver. But Nan didn't back down an inch. She swore she would handle the family's problems on her own. Her mother completely lost it, screaming that her daughter had no shame and lunging to attack her. Luckily, Wang Han was faster. He caught his would-be mother-in-law's arm mid-air, stopping her from laying a hand on the pregnant woman. Blood boiling, he locked eyes with Ju Min and unleashed. He asked what crime there was in being a delivery driver and whether he had offended his ancestors to be treated like that. He threw the truth in his face. What was shameful was trying to shove her own daughter into the arms of a scumbag. The woman went feral, thrashing and screaming for the stinking delivery guy to let her go. Even the grandmother jumped in, spewing venom and calling her granddaughter a disappointment. Meanwhile, the rejected suitor, livid, started threatening Nan's life for choosing a nobody over him. Nan froze, suffocated by the insult, unable to react. Wang Han didn't let it slide. With an explosive punch, he sent the bastard straight to the floor, tumbling all the way to the sofa. Pulling the girl close, he issued a final warning. She was carrying his child. He was his woman, and no one, especially that chin trash, had the right to touch her. The coward tried to get up, frothing with rage and shouting that the hero would pay dearly. Blinded by anger, he grabbed a heavy ashtray and charged, swearing to kill him. Wang Han didn't even flinch, staying calm and shielding the girl. When the blow came, he dodged it like it was nothing. With a sharp movement of his hand, he threw the rich brat off balance and sent him kissing the floor again, writhing in pain.
The hero didn't let up. He mounted the guy and raised his fist, warning that the lesson would be unforgettable. What followed were only Chin's screams for help as he took a brutal series of punches. Wang Han stopped only when an old man entered the room and demanded that he stop. The tension spiked when an elderly man with a cane, escorted by half the clan, stormed in, demanding to know who the audacious fool was causing such a scene. Nan went pale when she saw her grandfather and asked what he was doing there. The Sioux patriarch and the rest of the family surrounded the hero and the girl, while Chin lay on the floor, staring at the old man as if he'd seen a savior. Furious, the grandfather roared that he had heard every word of that disgraceful mess. Slamming his cane against the floor, he shouted, demanding to know if his granddaughter was really pregnant by that delivery driver. With no escape and visibly shaken, she lowered her head and confirmed everything. Chaos erupted. Relatives yelled that it was madness, an unforgivable insult to the Chin family. The beaten man staggered to his feet, vomiting hatred, saying that even if she got rid of the baby, that trash would never step into his house. The pressure turned vicious. Everyone pointed fingers at Nan, accusing her of ruining the family name. She held on as long as she could, but the stress took its toll. When she tried to tell them all to shut up, her vision darkened and she lost her balance. Before she could hit the ground, Wang Han caught her firmly in his arms, promising he would take care of her and get her out of that madhouse. Her parents still barked insults, calling him a filthy delivery guy and threatening to attack if he didn't let her go. He answered with a look of pure contempt, asking if they still consider themselves human after everything they had done. He stepped forward and with a brutal kick, split the table in half. The crash silenced everyone. Face hard, he announced he was taking Nan and dared anyone to try to stop him. No one made a sound. Fear locked the throats of the so-called tough guys. He walked out without looking back. It was fully night by the time they reached the apartment. Exhausted, Nan passed out on the way. With the utmost care, he laid her down on the living room couch. That was when he noticed her ID had slipped out of her bag. Curiosity hit hard and he couldn't resist. The guy picked up the documents from the floor to find out who the girl really was. The shock hit instantly. It was her birthday. He realized that even surrounded by luxury and money, her family treated her with such contempt that the date had gone completely unnoticed. No one cared. He left her passed out on the couch and rushed to the kitchen. After all, she was the mother of his child and deserved something decent. 20 minutes later, Nan began to wake up, still groggy, rubbing her eyes without knowing where she was. When she looked around, she was met with the sight of the hero wearing an apron, finishing a full spread. He asked straight up if she was hungry. She stayed silent, just trying to process the scene.
As she approached the table, the redhead was stunned. There was everything: soups, snacks, and dishes that looked like they came from a 5-star restaurant. She praised the smell, but couldn't resist teasing him when he started bragging, saying even Dubai royalty would beg for a plate like that. The mood was light until he showed up with a pink cake and a lit candle, wishing her a happy birthday. Nan froze, covering her mouth with her hand. Her face flushed instantly. She asked how he found out, still in disbelief. Wang Han set the cake on the table with a confident smile and asked if she was impressed by the surprise. Her defenses collapsed. Tears came without warning. The emotion hit so hard she couldn't even speak. He didn't push her. He let her vent and offered his shoulder, joking that it was a privilege not even international supermodels got. She let out a sad laugh, staring at the candle flame. When she finally tasted the food, the pleasure was immediate. She murmured in satisfaction, admitting he was a master in the kitchen. In the middle of that improvised dinner, with the table still full, he asked her to make a wish before blowing out the candle. Nan closed her eyes, thoughtful. He asked about her plans for the future. She looked at him, remembering his promise to support her and the baby, and asked if he would stand by his word or run away. Wang Han didn't hesitate. He said he wouldn't back down and would never abandon her. "Let's get married." Her answer came like a burst of courage. Nan jumped up from the couch, saying she wasn't afraid of anything. Without blinking, Wang Han sealed their fate. The marriage registration would be done the next day. He looked her straight in the eyes, making it clear the decision was final and that he would take responsibility no matter the cost. The romantic mood was cut short by his phone vibrating in his pocket. He excused himself and stepped out onto the balcony. On the other end, his subordinate dropped a bomb. The Hydra group had arrived in the city with one goal: to eliminate him. He stayed calm and asked about their location, learning they were circling the Lin mansion. While he smoked a cigarette and dealt with life or death issues, Nan tried to kill time on the couch. Her phone rang. It was a friend wanting to be the first to wish her a happy birthday. Nan told her the truth. She was second, and Wang Han had been the first. Then she dropped another bomb, saying she was getting married to him tomorrow. Her friend nearly lost it on the other end, screaming that she had gone crazy. Worried, Lin Sifu promised she would find a way to save her friend from that mess, determined to beg a powerful figure known by her grandfather to help pull Nan's family out of trouble. Out on the balcony, the conversation took another turn. The subordinate revealed that the eldest princess had been asking about his whereabouts. Wang Han almost choked on the smoke and ordered him not to dare say he was in Yangjing, but the damage was already done. The subordinate admitted that, afraid of the princess's wrath, he had already spilled the secret. The shock was so strong that Wang Han dropped his lighter.
He snorted in anger, asking why he had been betrayed like that. The only answer was a dry, "You're on the same level." Before the call ended, he stood there staring into nothing, knowing that being hunted by the princess meant double trouble. Before he could process it, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Lin Sufu, Lin Kanun's granddaughter, saying she wanted to talk. Lin Sufu wanted to discuss the new district project, but Wang Han was already out of patience. He snapped, saying the girl had no limits when it came to asking favors. Her grandfather, Lin Jun, quickly took the call to apologize, explaining that his granddaughter had taken the number from his phone without permission. Wang Han didn't waste time. He ordered a precision rifle for the next day and gave a final command. Full control of the new area project was to be handed over to Nan. Meanwhile, Nan tried to pass the time in the guest room with a book. Her mood lifted when her friend called with explosive news. An influential figure had agreed to close a deal with her family on the district project. Knowing she would be in charge made her glow, and she immediately scheduled a meeting for the next morning. When Wang Han showed up, curious, she brushed him off lightly, saying he wouldn't understand how important it was. She tried to hide her excitement, fixed her hair, and commented that she didn't know he liked reading. He picked up the book and told her straight that there was a lot about him she couldn't even imagine. For a second, he leaned closer and she froze, thinking he was about to touch her, but he was only reaching for the pillow behind her. He gave her firm advice, told her to put the book away and sleep because reading in the dark was bad for the baby, and said he would crash on the couch. Nan collapsed onto the bed, her face burning, impressed by how protective he was. Morning came and the hero was already at it, holding himself up on just 2 fingers in an insane push-up. Nan stepped onto the balcony, confused by the sight, and asked if he was training frog kung fu. He corrected her immediately, full of confidence, saying it was the legendary dragon hand. When she questioned it, he explained it wasn't some street fighting trick, but a deadly Chinese technique. When she asked why a delivery guy would need that, his answer was serious. His father taught him that strength exists to protect the ones we love and prevent the worst. He told her that breakfast was on the table and that he had already left everything ready for her in the bathroom. Nan was stunned by so much care. He just gave an enigmatic smile, saying she hadn't seen anything yet. When they were about to leave, the redhead asked to stop by her house first. When he asked why, she was straightforward. She needed to pick up the paperwork for the wedding. Wang Han was caught off guard, and she even teased him, asking if he wanted to back out. He didn't hesitate, assuring them they would get that certificate once and for all.
As soon as they hit the street, Nan asked when she would meet his parents. His answer was a cold shower, only after the baby was born. He was honest, saying he feared his family might not accept the relationship, but with a grandchild in their arms, they wouldn't be able to oppose it. Nan got annoyed, especially when he started teasing her, asking if she thought she was marrying some big shot. With a mocking tone, he said she only had a pretty face and good manners, adding that his family was very humble. Nan wanted to hear a proper compliment, something like being the perfect woman, but he cut it off with a joke and told her to get on the bike. He ordered her to hold tight around his waist and not say a word. She just told him to shut up and speed up. What they didn't see was Chin and his burly henchmen watching everything from the shadows. Boiling with rage, Chin crushed his cigarette and gave the deadly order: kill the delivery guy and kidnap the girl. The scarred thug and his gang moved immediately. On the road, the red motorcycle flew. Nan was pressed against his back, but Wang Han wasn't distracted. In the rearview mirror, he spotted a white van with dark windows right on their tail. He instantly sensed danger and, not wanting to drag his fiancée into a crossfire, changed plans. He twisted the throttle, weaving through traffic with absurd skill until he managed to shake them off for a moment. He stopped in front of the Su mansion and told her to go inside and get the documents, saying he needed to take care of a few things and would come back for her later. Nan agreed to text him and went in. As soon as she was out of sight, Wang Han saw the white van reappear. Instead of confronting them at the gate, he used the bike as bait and lured the thugs away, accelerating straight toward Lin Kin Jun's estate. The goal was clear: retrieve the arsenal he had ordered. He slammed the brakes, sliding the red bike sideways across the road. As he stared at the mansion's facade, he noticed a figure, a man with messy hair and a scruffy beard, watching from a window. Wang Han felt no fear at all. He got off the bike, determined to handle it, and walked into the mansion with the confidence of someone who owned the place. He cut through the living room and sprinted up the marble stairs straight to the office, where old Lin Kin Jun had already left the gift ready, a high-caliber precision rifle. As he gripped the heavy weapon, Wang Han silently credited the old man for his efficiency, but the mood shifted instantly. He ran into Lin Sufu, the host's granddaughter, standing in her bedroom
bedroom in nothing but underwear. The blonde screamed, cursing the stinking delivery guy and demanding to know what he was doing there. There was no time for talk. Wang Han saw a red laser dot appear on her forehead and didn't think twice. He lunged forward and slammed her to the floor. In the next instant, a shot shattered the window, glass exploding across the room. Sufu, completely confused, started struggling and yelling for him to let her go, but Wang An barked a cold order: "Shut up or you die."
Reality hit her when she saw the damage. With the rifle in hand, Wang Han took position to counterattack. He wanted to see if this so-called Hydra really had 9 lives. The weapon roared inside the bedroom. The bullet tore through the air toward the neighboring building where the shooters were hiding. The enemy returned fire immediately, and he had to act fast, throwing the girl back onto the bed to get her out of the line of fire. Their bullet grazed past and slammed into the wall. In the middle of the chaos, he grabbed her clothes and used them as a distraction at the window, realizing the siege was much bigger than he had expected. Too many people wanted his head today. Staying focused, he dropped into a seated position on the bed, braced the rifle, and aimed with surgical precision. A flash burst from the barrel, followed by another thunderous blast. The round punched through the glass and flew straight to its target, dropping one of the snipers in the neighboring building with a single fatal shot. The first shooter was down. With one less piece on the board, he made a sharp remark, saying he had expected more from Hydra. Lin Sufu, still in shock, demanded to know why he had broken into her house armed to the teeth, but Wang Han ignored her. He peered through the window gap and realized the fight was far from over. More armed figures were emerging in the distance. The retaliation came hard. A storm of heavy gunfire tore into the Lin mansion, shredding everything in its path. Wang Han acted as a human shield for the blonde, covering her with his own body as bullets ripped through the room. When the shooting paused, he pulled one of the rounds embedded in the wall and examined it. The hexagram marking left no doubt: elite ammunition from the Able Assassins, a dangerous Eastern European gang. He pinned the girl against the wall and demanded to know what she had done to attract those people. Completely panicked, Sufu remembered that a powerful foreign figure had tried to buy her company's scientific secrets and was turned down. Now, the payback was coming in bullets. To make things worse, Wang Han was out of ammo. He had only ordered 2 rounds from old Lin. In desperation, he spotted a large, sharp shard of glass on the floor and smirked. It was all he needed. With an explosive movement, he leapt toward the window and hurled the shard with superhuman force. The glass sliced through the air like a blade, crossed the street, and struck another sniper square in the neck in the opposite building. The man dropped his rifle and hung lifeless over the ledge. With the threat neutralized for now, Wang Han brushed the dust off his shoulder and told her she was safe. The blonde, trembling, realized that his delivery job was nothing but a cover. She asked who he really was, but he cut her off, saying the secret was for her own good. Sufu panicked and threatened to tell Nan everything if he didn't come clean. The hero shot her a deadly look and ordered her to shut up immediately, warning that something far more sinister was happening outside. Unstable, the girl let out a scream that echoed through the entire house.
Completely terrified, the blonde broke down and threw herself into his arms, sobbing and asking what would happen to her now. The danger wasn't over. Outside, hired thugs were desperate to figure out what a delivery guy was doing in that mansion. The scar-faced man, hired by Qin, assumed the hero was there to steal something. Unfazed, Wang Han calmly walked downstairs, hands in his pockets, and greeted them with a mocking hello. He stared at the thugs and asked if they were there because of him. The gang leader exploded with rage, shouting that they worked for Qin and that Nan belonged to their boss, accusing him of playing dumb. Wang Han didn't flinch. He tapped his forehead and, with a cynical smile, asked what they really wanted. The order was short and clear. He was never to touch the boss's woman again. Then he told his men to kill him on the spot. 3 hulking men armed with machetes rushed him, but the hero didn't even take his hands out of his pockets. Before the first one could touch him, he took a brutal, precise kick straight to the neck. The second thug fared no better. Wang Han planted the sole of his foot into the man's chest, sending him flying amid screams and curses. The gang leader froze, watching his men get wiped out by footwork that looked almost unreal. The scar-faced man snapped when he realized the delivery guy fought like an elite professional. Blinded by rage, he charged with the machete, but hit nothing. In a movie-worthy leap, the hero climbed onto the ceiling structure and, with a fast spin, kicked the weapon out of the man's hand, throwing him completely off balance. With a clean strike, he neutralized the gang leader. That was when Lin Sufu burst into the living room and screamed at the sight of the destruction. Taking advantage of the distraction, the thug recovered the weapon and lunged at the blonde, grabbing her by the arm and using her as a human shield. He threatened her life while the hero stood still, hands in his pockets. Sufu tried to warn him that her grandfather would destroy him, but the thug wasn't interested in talking. Wang Han, his gaze icy, told him to go ahead and try his luck. He began walking slowly toward the coward, who screamed for him to stop, pressing the machete against the girl's neck. Instead of backing off, the hero kept advancing, provoking him and testing his limits. Wang Han looked him in the eye and asked if he had lost his fear of death. Panicking, the thug yelled at him to take another step, but the hero ignored him. With absolute calm, he stopped the machete using only one finger. Leaning in with a cold stare, he asked if the man really dared to show such a pathetic technique in front of him. The criminal short-circuited. The blade wouldn't move, locked in place by Wang Han's absurd strength. Seeing the sweat pouring down the man's face, the hero simply tightened his grip. The machete shattered into countless pieces, crumbling apart. The thug stood there in shock, unable to react to that crushing power. Wang Han grabbed him by the throat and asked if a little shrimp like him really thought he could face a shark. Desperate to save himself, the man claimed he belonged to the powerful Black Dragon Society. Wang Han didn't blink. He said he didn't care, then slapped him so hard the man went flying.
Sprawled on the floor and missing teeth, the thug started babbling, begging him not to follow a life of crime. Wang Han ignored the moral talk and started kicking him mercilessly. Crying and clutching his stomach, the man even pleaded for mercy for the sake of his 80-year-old mother. That was when he dropped the bomb. He gave the hero 3 seconds to stop, warning that Xin Hao had already gone after Nan. The shock was total. Wang Han exploded with rage when he realized his fiancée was in danger. He delivered one last kick to the bastard and demanded to know why Sufu hadn't said anything sooner. At that moment, sirens filled the air. Before the police could surround the place, the hero vanished into the shadows, leaving Sufu with a final order: don't tell anyone he was there. When the cops arrived, they found the blonde in shock. She claimed she had been in the shower when the thugs broke in. As the criminals were handcuffed, an officer informed the captain that 2 strange bodies had been found in the neighboring building, but the worst was happening elsewhere. Xin Hao had managed to capture Nan. He shouted in victory, saying she had escaped last time, but now things would be settled by force. The redhead was cornered, screaming for him to get away. The fat man, wearing a disgusting smile, said he had already sent his pack after the delivery guy and that the man would end up dead. Seething with rage, the villain lunged toward the bed to attack her, swearing he would finish her right then and there. What he didn't expect was the hero's speed. Wang Han appeared like a lightning strike and smashed a heavy punch straight into the bastard's face, sending him crashing to the floor. The hero stepped over the fallen man and delivered an ultimatum, saying he must have a death wish to dare touch his woman. Xin Hao, clutching his swollen face, squealed like a pig and demanded to know if he had any idea who his father was. He shouted that he was the son of the richest man in the city and that the price for that punch would be high. Wang Han, eyes frozen with contempt, replied that he knew exactly who the old man was and that the father would pay for raising such trash. With a precise kick, he sent the fat man flying across the room and demanded silence. Nan, in tears, threw herself into her savior's arms. He calmed her down, assuring her that no one would lay a hand on her as long as he was around. As the villain fled, swearing revenge, she suddenly realized the time. She was desperate to make it to a decisive meeting at the company. Wang Han didn't hesitate and escorted her there. As soon as they arrived, the CEO was informed that Director Liu was already in the conference room. Nan entered, apologizing profusely for being late, accompanied by her new husband. The shock was immediate. Wang Han came face to face with his own assistant in the room. She nearly fell out of her chair when she saw her boss, but he reacted fast. He hugged her and pretended they were old school friends to avoid blowing his cover. Nan believed the act, and Director Liu, catching on, played along to protect the boss's disguise. They were about to open the project maps when the door burst open. A crowd stormed in, led by an imposing old man. He declared that Director Liu's presence was an honor for his family. While the woman with glasses greeted the patriarch, Nan stood frozen, staring at Grandmaster Su, unsure of what was coming next.
Tension exploded when Nan confronted her grandfather, demanding to know what he was doing there. Out of breath from rushing over without even eating, the old man snapped that the future of the neighborhood was at stake. He wasted no time tearing into his granddaughter, annoyed that she had dragged so many people into such an important meeting. Her response came like thunder. She shouted that she was in charge there and decided who could enter, since the project was in her hands. That was enough for Su Jianjie to lose it with his own daughter. He yelled for her to back down and stop trying to represent the family, demanding that her brother take over, while he tried to flatter the guests with drinks. The brother didn't miss the chance. Ignoring her completely, he went straight to Director Liu, belittling his sister as if she meant nothing to the company. He insisted the deal would only go through with him in charge. Desperate, she shouted at her grandfather, swearing the plan was her creation, but the patriarch shut her down with his usual coldness. She slammed her fist on the table, trying to restore order and demanding attention for Director Liu. That was when her uncle, Su Jiansang, struck with venom, telling her to give up everything and saying her destiny was nothing more than marriage. The protagonist couldn't stand the massacre anymore and fired back, accusing that pack of vultures of trying to steal her hard work. The atmosphere grew heavy. The family head ordered the man to shut up, treating him like an intruder. Furious, the grandfather ordered his granddaughter to remove that trash from his sight, but she stood her ground. She defended her husband fiercely. Wang Han reached his limit. He stood up with fire in his eyes and called them all cowards, reminding them that only she had legitimacy there. The old man exploded, shouting that a delivery guy had no right to give orders in that house. With an ironic smile, the hero looked at Liu and made it clear that the project belonged to her and no one else. Everyone was stunned when he treated the director like an old-school friend. Even as Su Li tried to maneuver to steal leadership, Director Liu delivered checkmate. He stated that either the woman remained in charge or he would seek other partners. The grandfather tried one last move, asking to speak with Liu's superior, but received a cold refusal. He wasn't at that level. Defeated and humiliated, the Su family patriarch collapsed into a chair, unable to react. Seeing the ship sinking, the uncle quickly changed his tone and begged Liu not to get upset, promising that the woman would have full control and that all demands would be met. Finally, Director Liu expelled everyone from the room, leaving only the protagonist to finalize the contract in peace, while the rest of the family left with their heads down, carrying the old man out. Outside, the tension lingered. Su Li began grumbling, outraged that they had given in to those conditions, but was immediately shut down by his father. While Director Liu and the red-haired woman finalized the contract inside, the protagonist didn't hold back, telling them all to their faces that the family was nothing but a bunch of clowns who only knew how to embarrass themselves. Elsewhere in the company, the uncle tried to calm his furious son, claiming he already had a plan to turn things around. Su Li even tried to pull Su Yang aside for a private talk with their father, but the old man stopped it, saying they were all in the same boat. That was when the bomb dropped. They confessed that Nan was adopted. The couple had taken her in years earlier because they couldn't have children. When Uncle Su Yanong asked about her origins, the answer was cold. No one knew who her biological parents were. They were probably already dead, leaving her with nothing but a cheap pendant. With a vile smile, Uncle Su Yanzong vowed to rip the project from her hands, keeping his malicious plan to himself. Meanwhile, the hero stepped outside to breathe. In the courtyard, he pulled out a cigarette and joined the guards. Seeing him well-dressed, the security guys offered a light and asked if he was there for a job interview. Wang Han laughed and told the truth. He was just a food delivery guy.
That revelation fueled the mockery. Guards and delivery workers were like cats and dogs, and the security team didn't miss the chance to laugh at him. Between drags, he asked what kept them working there. They admitted, shamelessly, that President Sue was the company's muse and the only reason they showed up every day. He criticized their submission, but the chubby guard shot back immediately, saying Han was in an even worse position as just a delivery rider. Suddenly, the guards froze and snapped to attention in unison. The boss appeared, praised their work, and asked about the car. The security team was on cloud 9 from the compliment, while the protagonist simply watched the exaggerated display. One of the guards, feeling a bit of pity, put a hand on Han's shoulder and dropped some advice, saying that even as a delivery guy, he still had the right to dream. The shock came immediately after. Nan looked at the protagonist and ordered him to get in the car. Before speeding off, he even waved at the guards, saying he would take their advice to heart. The security team stood there, frozen, speechless, watching the delivery guy disappear into the distance inside a luxury red sports car. Nan's joy was obvious. She explained that the plan had worked because her ally, Lin Sufu, had tracked down the real big shot pulling the strings. Wang Han didn't waste time and told her to pass the proper thanks on to the boss. Without hesitation, she stated that the next step was to make their union official on paper. The plan was set for the following morning. She was blunt and direct. The marriage was only so the child wouldn't grow up without a father. The deal was clear. After the baby was born, he would receive 30,000 yuan every month. Completely relaxed, he crossed his arms and said the amount was fair since she had decided to support his life anyway. Thinking his attitude was way too arrogant, she picked up the pace. Nan brushed off his insolence, laughing to herself, since as a delivery guy, he didn't make anywhere near that amount. Her red car stopped in front of his building. As soon as Han got out, something caught his attention.
He realized she already knew his address, but she brushed it off, saying GPS could take you anywhere. As they walked toward the building, his phone rang, and he asked for a moment. On the other end, the mood turned serious. He was informed that Calvolu, the leader of the Black Dragon Society, had seized a shipment of goods. On top of that, the dreaded black card had already arrived at his door. He assured them he would handle everything by the next day, but then he was questioned about whether he was really going to run off and get married. Wang Han boiled with rage. He demanded to know who had leaked the information and learned it had come from Link King Jun. The old man on the phone didn't buy the situation at all. He couldn't understand why Han had chosen a woman from the Su family when the country was full of powerful heiresses begging for a chance. Han started to lose control, shouting and ready to jump down the old man's throat, but the next piece of news stopped him cold. His older sister would be showing up tomorrow. Han even threatened to pull the plug on the old man's machines out of sheer anger. Nan stepped closer, sensing this strange tension, and asked what was going on. He covered it up immediately, hugged her, and said everything was under control, sending her off to rest. When they entered the apartment, a white card on the table stood out. She picked it up, curious, but Wang Han, already taking off his coat, claimed it was just a postcard for an acquaintance. To change the subject, he promised to cook a proper meal, saying she must be starving. Nan relaxed on the couch, starting to think that having a stay-at-home husband had its perks. Wearing an apron with his sleeves rolled up, he took over the stove. Wang Han assured her dinner would be ready soon, and she thanked him for the care. Holding a spatula, he declared that from now on he would take care of his wife, and that her child would never be a burden. He said he was now the man of the house, the head of the family. Nan stayed silent, watching him with a smile as she folded his jacket. Morning came, and the scene shifted to the registry office. There, their commitment became official. They walked out with the documents in hand, and Wang Han puffed out his chest, now officially a married man. Nan looked at his cocky attitude and asked if the head of the family was still going out to do deliveries that day. Without missing a beat, he said yes. His mind drifted to a fashion show, and he made it clear he would rather be surrounded by girls. Nan exploded in anger, shouting that not even marriage had changed his twisted ways. He shot back immediately, saying that dirty trash doesn't stick to the wall. The mood turned sour for good, and they went their separate ways, both stubbornly standing their ground. Wang Han decided it was time to settle the old man's account. He stopped in front of a massive skyscraper, the headquarters of the Black Dragon Society. What had once been a small neighborhood gang had turned into a criminal empire, living off extortion, loan sharking, and shady used car schemes. He entered the den ready to test the gang's strength and came face to face with a bald brute.
The man asked what he was looking for.
With his hands in his pockets and an icy stare, Han replied that he had come to collect what was owed. The thugs laughed and told him to go upstairs, but he didn't move. When they realized he was there to collect a debt from their boss, Bald Liu, their tempers flared. The big men clenched their fists, growling and asking if he'd lost his mind by barging into that place. One of them, with long hair, tried to beat the protagonist down, but Han didn't even blink. The punches felt like tickles. The attacker tried a low kick, but it was like kicking a concrete pillar. His legs gave out, and he collapsed on his own, staring at a man who seemed to be made of pure steel. To end the joke, Han kicked the long-haired thug straight in the face. Another bald guy tried his luck with a hate-filled punch, but only got a smile in return. With a quick leg movement, the hero sent him flying. The remaining men were shaking with fear. Without taking his hands out of his pockets, Han calmly asked if they were going to take him to Liu now. Upstairs, the boss, a muscular and arrogant man, was relaxing in his office with a companion when chaos struck. A subordinate burst into the room, screaming in panic and warning of the intrusion. Liu flew into a rage, shouting that he was busy and demanding to know who the suicidal idiot was who dared step onto his turf. The henchman didn't even finish his sentence. He froze when he saw one of his crew get hurled like a trash bag straight into the door. Liu Calvalu jumped out of his chair, shocked by the sheer force of the impact. He drew his gun, panting with rage and shouting threats into the dark hallway. As the subordinate ducked to avoid the flying debris, something sliced through the air. Liu barely had time to react before a black tablet flew straight at him. He caught it on instinct, but cold sweat ran down his face and terror took over the moment he realized who was knocking at his door. Pure fear spread across Liu Calvalu's face when he recognized the black card of the 10 Elders Association. The henchman beside him nearly passed out, trembling as he asked if that was the same sinister organization that ruled all the underworld bosses. He turned pale as a corpse when the intruder asked if he really knew the reputation of the 10 Elders. Liu Calvalu switched instantly and began desperate flattery. He called him young master, dropped to his knees, and humiliated himself, ready to carry out any order. Han, completely calm, said it was good to know his name still inspired fear after so many years. He put a cigarette in his mouth, and one of the bald men rushed over to light it like a trained dog. After a deep drag, Wang Han got straight to the point, saying he heard Liu had swallowed a large shipment that wasn't his. The bald man stammered excuses, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but Han laughed in his face. He mocked their suicidal courage for daring to steal from the Shilong Company. Meanwhile, Liu quietly tried to reach his gun, swearing he would return everything.
Without losing patience, the hero gave his final warning, saying that when the black card appears, neither gods nor ghosts escape death. That was the trigger. Liu pulled his weapon and aimed at Han, shouting that the young master had been foolish enough to enter his den alone. Han didn't move. With a flick of his finger, he shot the lit cigarette forward with bullet-like force. It slammed into the gun, knocking it off target, and the shot went straight into the ceiling. Han raised the black card again and declared that every worm who had pointed a gun at him that day was already fertilizer. With a wrist motion too fast to follow, he hurled the card like a blade. It sliced clean through Liu Calvalu's throat, ending his life in a second. The heavy body collapsed to the floor, lifeless. The companion panicked, screaming that the boss was dead. The tattooed henchman stood in shock, unable to believe his leader's empire had fallen in seconds. Cold sweat poured as the news spread, and a swarm of men in black suits rushed into the room, freezing at the sight. As everyone stared at the corpse, Wang Han calmly walked over to the subordinate, placed a hand on his shoulder, and gave the ultimatum. He had two choices: hand over all assets and take the throne as Han's lackey, or hand them over and join his former boss in hell. The man chose life without hesitation. Everyone immediately bowed in absolute submission, swilling loyalty to the young master. Han simply nodded and ordered them to shut up and take him to the stolen cargo. The game had changed. The scene shifted to the towering glass skyscraper of the Black Dragon. Qin, battered and accompanied by his henchmen, arrived determined. This would be the protagonist's last day. Hatred overflowed.
On the way to the executive office, he raged, yelling that he would pay any price for Bald Liu to send that delivery guy to hell. Inside, Long had already settled in the main chair, laying down new rules and promising wealth to those who followed him. Suddenly, Chin burst in with his head wrapped in bandages, shouting for the former boss. Seeing a stranger on the throne, Chin demanded to know where the bald man was. Long casually replied that the former owner was gone and that he was in charge now. Without wasting time, Chin made his offer, 50 million to erase one enemy. Long blew out cigar smoke and laughed, thinking it was a joke to pay that much for a simple courier. Chin lost control and shouted that it was serious. The delivery guy had beaten him and stolen his woman, and he wanted blood. The new Black Dragon boss stood up, told him to calm down, and asked for a photo of the target. Chin didn't have one, but knew the man's address. Interested in both the money and the prestige, Long decided to go personally to watch the show.
The order went out. Every henchman was mobilized to hunt the so-called king. As the net closed in, the hero returned to his delivery routine as if nothing had happened. At the warehouse, coworkers warned him that management was after him, but he shrugged it off, saying he'd deal with it after his shift. The others went their way. Han lit a cigarette, gripping the motorcycle handlebars, focused on the road. The calm didn't last. A black SUV cut him off, forcing him to brake. Han jumped off the bike, already cursing the driver, but froze when Kingo stepped out with a phone in hand, mocking how easily he had tracked him down. The protagonist kept his cool, stepping off the bike like a man with nothing to hide. Chin rushed forward, waving his gun and snarling that Han had a lot of nerve staying calm with death knocking at his door. The enraged fat guy, his head wrapped like a mummy from all the bandages, tried to swing the iron pipe, but the hero simply stepped aside. In one quick motion, Han flicked the lit cigarette straight into the man's mouth, making him double over in pain. Without letting up, the protagonist drove a knee into the middle of the fat man's chest and ordered him to kneel. When Shinu tried to act tough, he took a brutal elbow to the back that slammed him face first into the asphalt. Humiliated and coughing up the cigarette, the fat man screamed in desperation at the new boss, asking why the whole crew was just standing there watching the massacre. The door of the black SUV opened, and Long stepped out with his men. Han didn't even bother to look back, simply lighting another cigarette. Long sneered, saying delivery guys were getting way too bold, and told his men not to kill the kid too fast because he wanted to have some fun with him. The new boss, someone Han himself had put in power just minutes earlier, walked up with swagger and planted a heavy hand on the hero's shoulder. When Han turned around with a look of pure disgust, Long's world collapsed. He went pale, broke out in a cold sweat, and panic took over. Before he could stammer a word, a sharp slap sent his cigar flying. Han made it clear the idiot had barely taken the position and already thought he could lay hands on him. Long started shaking from head to toe, begging for forgiveness and swearing that if he had known it was the master, he never would have shown up. Shinu, sprawled on the ground, didn't understand what was happening and started yelling about young masters, but didn't finish. Trying to prove himself to the real boss, Long delivered a vicious kick to the fat man's face, sending him rolling across the ground. Han stepped on the fat man's chest and issued the ultimatum. If he wanted to keep breathing, he'd better disappear. He warned that Nan was now his wife, and if he ever came near her again, there would be no talk, only a coffin. The fat man screamed as he took one last kick to the face. As the dust settled, Han checked his phone and saw his delivery time was almost up. He got on his bike and took off, leaving the thugs behind. Shinu, furious, tried to question why Long hadn't handled it, but the new boss shut him down, saying that wasn't a simple delivery guy, it was someone no one in the underworld dared to challenge. The red motorcycle stopped in front of an old crumbling building. Han walked through the dusty area, slipping back into the role of an ordinary worker, while the chaos he caused still echoed through the city. He moved down the gray hallway, smelling mold and silently complaining about the place falling apart. He was carrying someone's dinner, eager to drop it off and leave. At the peeling wooden door, he knocked as usual. A worn-out-looking man answered, took the package, and pulled out cash to pay. The mood shifted when strange noises came from inside. A little girl suddenly ran out in panic, screaming that she was being kidnapped. Before she reached the door, another thug yanked her back, telling her to shut up. Han tried to understand what was going on, but the customer snapped that it was none of his business, shoved the money into his hand, and slammed the door. Inside, the criminals panicked. They decided they couldn't let the delivery guy leave alive after what he'd seen.
Outside, Han scratched his head, amused by the irony of running into amateur criminals during a food delivery. He didn't even flinch when one of the cowards opened the door and charged at him with a knife. With a quick kick, Han sent him to the ground and took the weapon. Cracking his neck, he complained that even when working honestly, fate still forced him to beat someone up. The second thug froze. He immediately realized this wasn't an ordinary delivery guy, but a master who knew exactly what he was doing. With no way out, he launched a desperate attack, shouting that Han shouldn't have gotten involved. The shout turned into a scream when Han locked his arm. Mocking the man's terrible technique, Han threw a clean punch that crushed his face before he passed out and collapsed onto his partner. In the back, the girl's cries for help continued. Han didn't waste time and kicked the bedroom door open. What he saw filled him with rage. In the filth, the girl was tied up, shaking in terror and begging for help. He approached, carefully undid the knots, and asked if she could still walk. She said she could, still in shock. Without hesitation, Wang Han took off his yellow jacket and gently placed it over her shoulders. He told her the cops were on the way, handed her his phone so she could call her family, and told her to get out of that place. While she spoke to her relatives, Han grabbed a rope and dragged the two cowards outside. He tied them together to make sure neither could escape, then sat down to wait. Looking at the thugs on the ground, he said their bad luck was running into the wrong guy. Impressed that he took down both men alone, the girl thanked him and said her name was Xiao Jing. Suddenly, his phone rang, and she almost dropped it when she saw who was calling.
Han answered defensively, asking who the pain was this time. On the other end, a female voice exploded in anger. It was his older sister, furious that the pretty boy had gotten married without saying a word to the family. Han immediately shrank back, trying to make excuses, but she wasn't having it, and said she'd be arriving in the city that very night. He sighed, thinking the Witch of the East was on her way. At that exact moment, the building door burst open. A desperate older man rushed in, followed by two police officers. Seeing her father, Xia Zheng ran to him and broke down crying in his arms. Panicked, the man only wanted to know if his daughter was okay. She said she was and pointed to her savior. As the police loaded the criminals into the patrol car, the white-haired man stared at Han in disbelief, unable to accept that a simple delivery guy had wiped the floor with two thugs. As someone experienced in martial arts, he immediately sensed the heavy aura around the young man, the kind that only elite masters possessed. He handed over his card and introduced himself as Xian Shang, a major figure from the White Tiger School, making it clear that Han now owed him a favor he could claim anytime. Han thanked him for the contact and promised to return the visit, but quickly excused himself, saying he was short on time. The old man tried to stop him by offering 50,000 a month to work at his dojo, hoping to keep that talent close. His daughter even shouted that his shirt was stained with blood, but the hero didn't look back. He walked past the officers, got on his bike, and started the engine. He let out a heavy sigh, realizing that even a simple delivery could turn into a battlefield. Now his only mission was finding Nan before the night got even crazier. Han tore down the road, leaving only a cloud of smoke behind him as he sped toward his wife. The scene shifted to the luxurious glass skyscraper of the Su family. Inside, Nan was buried in stacks of documents when she was interrupted. A man named Lin Jin Pen appeared with an air of confidence, saying he flew in the moment he heard she was in trouble. Nan, completely out of patience, blocked him with a folder, thanked him for the kindness, but made it clear the company had already handled everything and that his presence was unnecessary. The man panicked. He started whining that he turned down countless women because he only had eyes for her. When Nan didn't even blink, he went all in, grabbing her hand and begging her to marry him, promising her everything. Nan snapped. She slapped him hard enough for the sound to echo through the office and demanded respect, declaring that she was married and pregnant. The man stumbled back, hand on his face, unable to believe he had been replaced. At that moment, Han walked into the office with a crooked smile, joking that the competition was fierce. Lin Jin Pen, furious, demanded to know who the intruder was who didn't even knock. Ignoring the clown, Han told his wife he brought food, saying a pregnant woman shouldn't go hungry. That's when Nan delivered the final blow by officially introducing Han as her husband. Han's heart skipped a beat hearing the title out loud.
Meanwhile, Lin Jinpen stared at Han from head to toe in shock, refusing to accept that this man was the one who owned his muse's heart. Han casually pointed to the door and said the couple was about to eat, and he hated having a third wheel during private moments. Nan backed him up and told the man to get out. Lin left, seething with rage, swearing he wouldn't give up. Nan didn't care and warned that she'd fire the reception staff if they let any stranger upstairs again. Han set the food on the table and mocked the rival, saying the guy was so pathetic he ran off before a fight even started. Nan shot back that there were no feelings involved, so there was no real rivalry. Han smiled like someone who knew exactly what he was doing, but her words about no feelings still poked his ego. Nan dug into the food. The meals were well prepared, with fresh vegetables and seafood and sauce. The calm didn't last long when Han snapped one of the containers shut, deep in thought. Nan blew up. In a petty moment, he threatened to take her plate away since there were no feelings between them. She fired back, yelling that his job was to feed her until she was full, since he was the only reason she was pregnant. Between bites, she had to admit the truth. His cooking was incredible. The redhead suggested he hang up his bike keys and open a restaurant, promising to invest heavily in his talent. With his ego soaring, Han replied that his seasoning was far too exclusive for just anyone. Nan frowned and jabbed back, saying he'd probably cooked for plenty of women before. He shot back coldly that he only cooked for one person, or rather for the baby, since there was nothing going on between them. Nan noticed he wasn't wearing his delivery uniform. That's when he slipped up and said that during a delivery, he had saved a girl and lent her his jacket. That was enough. Nan exploded with jealousy and kicked him out of the office, screaming for him to go find that so-called beauty. Outside, Han stood there, confused by the sudden meltdown. He shouted through the door that pregnant women shouldn't get angry, but all he heard was the door slamming in his face. Inside, Nan, fuming with jealousy, grabbed her phone to calm down and saw a message from him, telling her to eat quietly while he went back to work to make sure their baby would have formula. She took a deep breath and sent a reply, inviting him to have dinner with her family that night, but made it clear he would attend only as the child's father. Out on the street, Han read the message and muttered to himself. Her stubbornness annoyed him. He wanted to be called her husband, not just a donor. He got on his red motorcycle and tore down the road, speeding off to wrap up the jobs he still had around the city.
Night fell, and Nan's luxury car stopped at the gates of the family mansion. The moment she walked in with her husband, her mother went on the offensive. The older woman demanded to know why her daughter insisted on defending that man. Nan stood firm and declared that she was already married and had brought her soulmate to dinner. Her mother nearly collapsed in shock, screaming if her daughter had any idea how insane she was being. Marrying a delivery guy? Nan's mother nearly had a stroke. She screamed in disbelief, but the redhead didn't back down. She locked eyes with the woman, fire in her gaze, and said she knew exactly what she was doing with her life. To keep the fight from blowing up the whole neighborhood, Su Jian stepped in, ordering both of them to stop the scene. Nan's brother also joined in, arguing that she had the right to marry whoever she wanted. With a forced smile, Su told the new son-in-law to make himself comfortable, while the father ordered Nan to go upstairs and change before dinner was served. As the couple headed up, Nan's mother was still seething, calling everyone crazy for accepting that sham marriage. Su Li tried to calm her down, assuring her that Xinhao, the so-called young master, was about to arrive. The woman lit up at the news, eager to watch that rich pretty boy put the low-class delivery guy in his place. The moment Qin stepped into the living room, Nan's parents welcomed him like royalty. Qin, confused by the urgency, asked why he had been called. Su Li, acting mysterious, said she had a surprise for him. When Nan and Han came back downstairs, the girl froze. She couldn't understand what that man was doing at a private family dinner. Her mother immediately scolded her, demanding respect for the guest, but Nan's eyes locked onto one detail. There was only one empty chair. Her mother's intention was obvious. Nan was supposed to sit next to Qin, leaving Han standing like a servant. The old woman shouted that the Su family table wasn't a place for ordinary people to sit. Calm as ever, Han asked why he couldn't sit if Qin could. His mother-in-law almost spat fire, telling him to look in the mirror because he didn't have the pedigree to be there. The family patriarch cut through the mess with a shout. Whoever had a seat should sit. Whoever didn't could eat standing or off to the side, but everyone was to shut up. In open defiance, Nan grabbed Han's arm and led him to the only chair, saying she would stand so her husband could sit. Su Jian exploded, accusing his daughter of losing her mind and ordering her to take the seat next to Qin. That's when everything flipped. Han walked up to Qin and locked onto him with an icy stare that made the fat man start sweating buckets. Terror took over. Qin instantly remembered who Han really was. Unable to handle the pressure, the young master shot up from his chair like he'd been electrocuted and begged Han to take his seat instead, choosing to stand himself. Nan's parents were left stunned, trying to stop the humiliation of a noble giving up his chair to a nobody. But Qin, shaking, made it clear. If Han wasn't worthy of sitting there, then he himself was even less worthy.
Han flashed a victorious smile at his wife and, with the poise of a true boss, told the mother of his child to sit down, reminding everyone that a pregnant woman had no business standing. Ignoring the heavy atmosphere, Han sat down and started filling Nan's plate, insisting she needed protein for the baby. Her parents watched in disbelief, unable to understand how the powerful Qin had turned into a doormat. Thinking she still had the upper hand, Suli leaned toward Qin and whispered that she had a surprise. She had spiked Nan's wine to knock her out and make things easier for him. It backfired instantly. When Qin heard the disgusting plan, he nearly had a heart attack. He knew that if Han found out he was involved in drugging his wife, his life wouldn't be worth a dime. Panicking, he screamed at Nan not to touch the glass, yelling that the wine was poisoned. Without hesitation, he pointed at Suli, exposing the scheme right there. Nan boiled over. She jumped up and, without thinking twice, threw the red wine straight into her cousin's face, screaming if she had lost her mind. Suli stammered, trying to wipe her face, shocked by Qin's betrayal. Han, however, showed no mercy. Seeing someone try to drug his wife unleashed the monster. In a blink, his fist smashed into Suli's face, sending her crashing to the floor. He growled that if anyone ever laid a finger on his wife again, he would personally send them to the morgue. Disgusted by the rotten atmosphere, Nan grabbed her husband's arm and decided to leave that filthy house. Bizarrely, Nan's mother rushed to help her sneaky niece instead of her own daughter. Inside the car, Nan was puzzled. She asked why Qin trembled just from looking at Han. With a crooked smile, he said some people only learn through pain, and that the fat man had become well-mannered after getting what he deserved. Nan laughed, thinking it was just bravado, and commented that her family was complicated. Han smiled back and said the rules in his family made hers look like a playground. The victorious mood vanished when he checked his phone. A cry of pure panic escaped him as he yelled that everything was over. His older sister, the dreaded witch, had sent an ultimatum. He had 10 minutes to show up at the meeting point. When they reached his building, Han's fear was obvious. Nan, confused, asked who this visitor was that left him in such shock. He gave her one final warning. Don't interfere, don't say a word, and for the love of God, stay quiet when you see his sister. Inside the apartment, Han came face to face with his older sister, Ra Ruswan, lounging comfortably on the couch, smoking and radiating authority. He tried desperation tactics, forcing a smile and loudly saying how much he missed her, asking why she took so long. Ra Ruswan didn't move. She simply crossed her arms and gave him a soul-piercing stare, making the underworld boss look like a naughty child.
The tension hit instantly. Without even saying hello, she ordered her brother to kneel. He didn't hesitate and dropped down under his wife's horrified gaze. Rao Ruswan was seething with rage. She turned to the redhead and gave the same order, but Nan stood there confused, not understanding what was happening. Wang Han shouted that his wife was pregnant and couldn't kneel, but Rao Ruswan moved brutally forward and grabbed her by the arm. The red-haired woman stared at her own wrist in irritation, while the other checked her pulse to confirm whether the pregnancy story was true.
Once it was confirmed, Rao Ruswan unleashed her rage by kicking her brother, shouting that all his time abroad had done was bring trash back with him. Collapsed on the floor, the man begged to be heard, but his sister refused to listen. First would come severe punishment under the family's laws. Talk could wait. Out of nowhere, Nan stepped in front of him to protect the father of her child, confronting the woman and shouting that she would not lay a hand on him. Nan snapped, saying she knew nothing about their rules and that the man was being attacked without even knowing what crime he had committed. Rao Ruswan went on about the family's values, respect, discipline, and proper conduct. To her, marrying in secret and getting pregnant early was an absolute disgrace and a complete lack of manners. When she implied that Nan was not worthy of her husband, Nan exploded with indignation and demanded to know who this so-called ideal woman was. With an air of superiority, Rao Ruswan listed that her brother had already rejected 4 powerful heiresses, including a general's granddaughter and members of high society. The man tried to calm things down, asking them to spare his pregnant wife, but Nan was already fed up with the whole performance. She shouted that everything about it was ridiculous and that they were acting like children. Believing that her husband had invented all that talk about nobility in generals out of sheer shame for who he really was, Nan did not believe a single word. She did not want to raise her child in the middle of that mental chaos and filth. Even as he tried to hold her back, Nan turned away. She said they would only see each other again when the baby was born and went to stay at her best friend's house. Exhausted and disappointed, she vented that she never imagined the man she lived with was capable of something like that. The mask fell. Lin Sufu remarked that apparently the guy had not been acting at all. Mrs. Su, on the other hand, refused to accept reality. To her, he must have just found some random woman to take part in that farce. The friend fired back immediately. If that story was real, then he was nothing but a fraud. Nan felt the blow and glared at her friend with anger, questioning why she suddenly seemed to be defending the man. The atmosphere grew tense, and Nan, beside herself, grabbed Lin Sufu's hand, demanding that she spit out the whole truth she was hiding.
Lin Sufu tried to dodge it, swearing she knew nothing and questioning how Nan could even doubt her. To change the subject, Nan asked whether they had managed to get in touch with the powerful figure who controlled everything. The blonde assured her she would handle it. In the middle of the night, a loud knock on the door startled them both. Lin Sufu opened it and came face to face with Lin Jin. Before she could ask what he wanted, he went straight to the point. He had a way to reach the billionaire investor. If Nan wanted, he could set up a party for the meeting to happen. Lin Sufu could hardly believe it. How could he know the owner of $1 billion investment in the new district? He explained that his grandfather had already made the connection and that the meeting was practically set. Hearing that, Nan felt a breath of hope. The next day, the anguish returned. Huan Han muttered to himself, suffering because his wife was too stubborn, would not answer her phone, and refused to hear any explanation. He was at his limit. On the balcony, smoking to calm down, his phone buzzed. He smiled, thinking her heart had softened, but the disappointment hit hard. It was not her. The message was from Zan Jing, the girl he had saved, saying she wanted to return the washed clothes. Cold and brief, he replied that there was no need and that she could throw everything away. As he stared at a black pearl he had received from his sister, the phone rang again. The news was brutal. Ironhead was dead. The shock was total. The man had died trying to save people from drowning. Far away, Zan Jing lay on her bed, glued to her phone with her heart in pieces. She felt worthless because her hero would not even look at the clothes she had cared for so lovingly. Sadness consumed her, feeling that the man who saved her life was slipping away forever. Her father walked into the room and found his daughter in that pitiful state. When he asked what was going on, she snapped irritably that he had not knocked. He swore that he had, but she had been lost in her own world. He then reminded her that the next day would be important. The plan was to take her to the birthday party of the so-called young master show, but the invitation only made her furious. She yelled that she would not set foot at a party for someone who was only alive because a real man had died trying to save him, calling the birthday boy a complete idiot. She refused to let her father force her into that scene. Laughing at the situation, her father caught on and asked whether she had messaged the delivery guy. Humiliated, she admitted she had and that he had brushed her off, saying he didn't even want the clothes back. Her father tried to comfort her, saying that if he didn't want them, it was a sign that fate did not want them together. On the day of the party, the mood soured quickly.
The birthday boy lost his temper with a journalist who asked tough questions and turned aggressive, trying to kick the woman in public. What he did not expect was a brutal intervention. A figure appeared out of nowhere and stopped the attack. Huan Han emerged like a shadow and with a single clean strike, knocked Shou out cold. The impact was so violent that the birthday boy was sent flying several feet back, crashing into the wall and losing consciousness completely.